Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is finally contacting me after almost 10 years. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of normal households. Parents worked a lot, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but never had any issues either. Same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas and always got along great. But when we got older we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending uni, I got a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first, because I was gaming with friends. But she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important. Like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chaos in the other end. Like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked what was going on and I heard she was crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess to regarding E. E is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point I hadn't even seen E for several years. I just said no and asked what this is about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of SA-ing E back when we were children. That E had told everything to my sister, and that my sister told my mother and my aunt. E had told them that back when she was 9, and I 16, she'd been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her under her clothes and kissing her. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that E is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that how E gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her no. Each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker and both my mom and dad saying that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. 2 of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call I went to have a long shower. To this day I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even E. No one answered and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this fucked me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily my co-writer sensed something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him I sure I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arresting me for sexual abuse. I didn't land any jobs, just living off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is because no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass, but I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could hurt E and make sure no one ever found out. Even thinking how I could actually do the things she'd accused me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less and smiled more. I lived cheap and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego etc. And last year I moved from my shitty apartment and bought a small house. It was an old dream of mine to have my own garage and a garden to care for. This has boosted me even more. So my life is okay now. I still got problems. I've been on antidepressants for the last few years and while they help, it's not in a happy way. They simply remove the dark thoughts and replace them with dead ones. My trust in other people is close to non-existent. I've tried dating, but only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's really hard to speak like a normal person when it comes down to it. And what would I tell a potential partner when she asked about my family? Oh, you know they accused me of a heinous crime and we're not talking anymore. But I didn't do it, I swear. My field is very male-dominated, so the only woman I really speak to is my therapist, who I like a lot. A few days ago, I received a text from my mother. It felt unreal and I was scared to open it at first, so I just stared at the notification for hours before opening it. Yesterday, a second text followed. Translated, they basically say, "Hi, my name, it's been so long since we talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." Here she writes a long text about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are getting big. I didn't even know I was an uncle. Know that we love you and always will. Love, Mom and Dad. The second text said, "Hi, my name, we understand if you don't want to talk to us after what happened, but please listen. Last month, the subject of you was brought up at a family gathering. During this, E was downplaying everything that had happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and that she probably just dreamt it. We were all appalled by this. When we last spoke, we wanted to protect E and did the only thing we thought we could do. We know that's not excusing how you were treated. What E did was wrong and we're all angry at her. We have called everyone that knew and told them the truth. We all want to speak with you and your sisters want you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in you to forgive us. Love, Mom and Dad." So yeah. That's my situation right now. I haven't answered, but they no doubt know I've seen it. Truth be told, I'm seething. So many old, shitty memories are now stirring again. I don't want to forgive them and I wouldn't trust myself to be in the same room as them right now. Part of me wants to call my family and unleash everything on them, to guilt them with everything I went through until they all hit their rock bottom. Then dedicate my life to make my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part wants to ignore them and continue with my okayish life with my motorcycle and my garden to keep me company. I don't have any friends. The only people I speak to are my coworkers, but we're not really close. I've called my therapist's clinic, but they told me she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks, and I don't want anyone else than her. So that leaves internet strangers. So please, where to go from here? Do I ignore them and continue as is? Or do I answer? And if so, what to even write? I'm pretty sure meeting them in person would be a bad idea for a foreseeable future, but I'm not even sure how my life can improve from picking up those old threads. As embarrassing as it may sound, I've dreamed about the day when they apologize to be them throwing themselves to the ground and kissing my feet. Texting seems so anticlimactic now. Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is contacting me after almost 10 years part 2. So it's been around 3 months since I last posted the previous post and a decent amount has happened. Some for the better and some for the worse. For one, E is still a huge a-hole. Around a week after my family sent me the messages, she also reached out with a huge apology text. When I received it, I couldn't believe my eyes. She was talking about how she had mental problems and has been dealing with them for ages, almost as an excuse as to why she did this to me. She said she needed help and her parents were helping her get it. This seemed like BS to me because all my life I knew E. She was a beaming, radiant girl, until that dreadful day in 2014. The whole text felt like she was just feeding me excuses to why it happened, and then ending it off with the shortest actual apology. My original plan was to go on with my life and try to slowly make it better and better, but seeing this pushed me to my limit. I had to respond, and tear into her with the most vile words I could think of. In the end, the actual text I ended up sending said, "You think your mental problems are bad? Try being torn away and excommunicated from your whole family for 10 years when you were just in the infant years of your adult life, and see how bad those mental problems become. I am still trying to deal with all of this and the last thing I need is the culprit of my misery feeding me excuses as to why it happened. My other relatives may have been in the dark the whole time, but you knew the entire time, and it never dawned on you to say things sooner? You're lucky I didn't unalive myself at this point. My parents and sibling might be another story, but I will never be able to forgive you for the irreversible damage you have done to me and my relationships. Please, rot in hell and never contact me again." She hasn't responded, but I can see that she got the message because of read receipts. Maybe she took the hint to not respond. The good news is that I also responded to my parents. Nothing crazy in text because we really got the whole conversation out over the phone. It felt weird hearing their voices again. I used to relate those voices to being safe and home, but after what happened it was a whole new feeling. At first, I hated it. All the sour memories popped back into my brain from the day I last spoke to them. Those voices had been screaming at me for things I didn't even do. The conversation lasted about 3 to 4 hours, and while it was hard for me and most likely them, it was the most productive conversation I've ever had with them. I thought it would be a lot of excuses just like E, but to my surprise, they not only apologized a million times over, but told me everything they were in the wrong about. They said it was weighing on them all these years and now that the truth is out they don't know how they can live with themselves. The one really hard part was when I asked them why they didn't hear me out or believe their own son compared to a niece. They told me they struggled with it immensely but E had made it so believable that they felt they had no choice. I told them that instead of just cutting contact, they should have at least tried to get me help, but they gave me nothing to work with. They said they knew this and that was the hardest part. After the first year or two, they said they wanted to contact me and try to figure things out, but they ultimately decided that me being who I was would not talk to them and things would just get worse. That got me heated a little bit because who cares what type of person I am? What I really am is your son and that comes first. At the end we came to the conclusion that we will stay in contact. I am not going over to visit them or anything but it's a start. While there is still so much hatred in my heart for them, I feel like things can get better, and that's why I'm somewhat happy. Since that phone call, we frequently check up on each other, and conversations are slowly getting back to what they used to be. Maybe I'll visit them someday, but I don't know when that will be or how it will go. How am I supposed to hug and say hi to the people who threw me out of their life? Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is contacting me after almost 10 years. Final part. Hey guys, so I have another update on my whole situation regarding E and the SA. It has been another 4 to 5 months since the last update and I have some better news than worse this time again. To start off, a lot of people were telling me to sue or take E to court. While I agree that what she did was unforgivable and heinous, I don't feel like that will cause any good. The situation has been 10 years in the making and I kind of just want to be all over and done with it. Taking her to court would cost me thousands in legal fees that I just can't afford, and I also can't help but think of the fact that E never took it to court either. I know that's not a good excuse but it's just a thought. I am still in contact with my parents and you won't believe it but I actually visited them around a week ago. They also have removed contact with E, and I feel like her getting the same treatment I went through is similar to being sued in terms of punishment. Believe me I would know. Visiting the parents went well. I haven't seen the rest of my family as I want the process to be gradual, but we met and had a nice dinner, of course. In my last post I said I didn't know how the greeting process would go. How was I supposed to greet the people who tore my normal life away? Well, the greeting went better than I imagined. I thought hate would win over me but I actually felt somewhat relieved when I saw them. Is that weird? Maybe it was the fact that seeing them meant maybe my life was getting back to the normal it was before, but I don't know. I didn't hug them until after because the conversation we had was pretty grueling. I didn't mean to rip into them but I felt I had to really get the point across of how much hurt they had caused me. At some point my mother cried, because of the detail I went into about my darkest times. They said they know they can't do anything to fix what has happened but want the future to be optimistic. They even opened the idea of coming home for Christmas and seeing the rest of the family, but I told them my plan about taking it slow and said I might be open to the idea. While I am still conflicted, that feeling of hatred is slowly going away and I am overall just feeling like a better person in general. I think the weight of the situation had pulled me down all those 10 years and now that I am free of judgment it feels good. I have also started dating now, and met a great girl that I am starting to slowly get serious with. Life is getting better. Who knows what will happen in the next 10 years after this, but for the first time in ages I feel like things are going up. For all those reading, please use my story as an aid to your personal problems and grudges. Things do get better, even if you have to wait 10 years. My perfect sister made false accusations against me because I refused to supply alcohol for her party. My parents decided to take a vacation to ski in Aspen and let my sister watch the house for them. They told her no parties, but that was a rule she straight up ignored. A day after our parents left, my 18-year-old sister started sending out invites to a party. And she was promising free alcohol. I didn't see that post just yet. But my sister called me and asked me to go get alcohol for her party, because I was over 21 and could legally buy it. She also wanted me to pay for it and said she'd invite me to the party and introduce me to an easy girl in order to pay me back. I told her that I wasn't going to break the law to make her happy. She should never have told people her party would have alcohol. She screamed at me over the phone that I was ruining her life, and that she couldn't take back the invites now that they were all over her Facebook. I looked at her post and face-palmed. I told her that what she did was really stupid, and she and her friends were all underage. So it's illegal. She tried to say it'd only be illegal if I narked on them. I said I wouldn't narc, but I wasn't going to buy her booze either. She screamed at me some more, so I hung up the phone. Well, that night my sister had the party. And someone called the police for underage drinking. After being arrested and confronted by police later on, my sister threw me under the bus and said that I'd supplied the alcohol she was using. Turns out she actually broke into Dad's liquor cabinet, and thought it'd be better to frame me for her crime. Police came and arrested me at my apartment the day after the party. They seemed already convinced I was guilty, and didn't really listen to me when I said I was never there. But I willingly cooperated with them. At the station I told them the whole story, and got them to look at my sister's Facebook post. Thankfully there were a few people there who listened to me. But I still had to sit the night out in a cell while my parents were called. My mom and dad flew back home overnight, and bailed out both my sister and I. At first, my mom tried to make my dad leave me in jail, because my sister had told them her lies as well. But my dad took the time to talk to me, and look at my sister's Facebook. He believed me. This caused a fight between him and my mom. When they got home my dad discovered my sister had broken into his liquor cabinet, and spoke to police on my behalf. My mom however still wanted the blame to fall on me because as she put it the charges were ruining her baby's future. But my innocence was further proven by the fact that I and my car were seen on CCTV when I left work. On top of that, the apartment I was living in had CCTV cameras which watched the parking lot and showed me arriving home soon after. My car did not move from there for the rest of the day and night. In my sister's story to the police I had driven out and gotten the alcohol for her. But I wasn't seen on CCTV in any liquor store in the county, and my bank account showed no transactions buying alcohol. My parents' house also had a camera at the front door, and my car was never seen in the driveway that day. After being confronted with those facts, my sister's story changed to saying I already had the alcohol and gave it to her at my apartment. But my sister's car had never showed up at my apartment either. And there were like 3 cheap beers in my apartment fridge and no hard alcohol. My sister finally had to give up on her lies, and my parents were severely disappointed in her. However, my mom still tried to convince me to take the fall for my sister. She came to my apartment and actually demanded that I tell the police that it was all my fault. I said I wasn't going to ruin my future for my sister. She refused to leave and went from demanding to begging. She even got on her knees and tried to convince me that she and my dad would make everything okay in the long run if I just took the blame now. I said I'd rather live my life poor than have that felony on my record. She threw a huge fit and started throwing things because I refused to do as she wanted. I threatened to call the police and she left my apartment cussing me out like a mad woman. I've never heard so many F-bombs out of her before or since. But she kept them up all the way to her car, and followed it up with saying she should have aborted me before driving off. I called my dad right away and told him everything that happened. He was insanely pissed and got in a huge fight with my mom as soon as she got home. She didn't even deny anything she said or did, because she deemed it would have been for the greater good of their daughter. My dad told her that she couldn't destroy me to save my sister. Then he threatened to divorce her if she didn't try to make things right. She ended up sobbing and then saying she'd do whatever he wanted. My dad said that it was couples and family counseling, or it was divorce. My mom signed a prenup before she married him, and really had no choice. In the family counseling I called her out on how she always believed my sister's lies. My sister tried to say they were not lies. But each one I pointed out from over the years said otherwise. I'd taken the time to write a list of all the ones I could remember from the past decade that had all been proven she lied. My mom and sister were forced to stay silent as I read them all. They tried to interject repeatedly, but my dad and the counselor silenced them. My sister, now proven beyond a doubt to be a liar and a manipulator, just shut down and refused to say anything more to the counselor. My mom finally apologized to me, but it was obviously a forced apology because she looked so uncomfortable doing it. I told her that her apology was very fake, and after so many years of favoritism the damage was already done. My relationship with her never really recovered, because she was convinced I was guilty no matter what was said until my sister admitted the truth. Then she wanted me to pretend to be the guilty one anyway to protect her favorite child. But nothing went her way. So she just went back to crying about it. When my sister went to court, my mom pleaded with the judge to go easy on my sister. She had charges of underage drinking and giving other underage people alcohol, as well as attempting to frame me for her crime. She also resisted arrest when the police came and shut down the party. She was very drunk when it happened. They kept her in a cell overnight to sober up, and then she told police I'd been the one to provide the alcohol. My mom's begging, along with a relentless lawyer my parents hired, got the judge to cut a deal. This was provided my sister pleaded guilty, which she did not want to do. But her lawyer highly recommended she take said deal to avoid jail time, because there was no other way of keeping her from getting a felony on her record. My sister's lawyer used the fact that the alcohol had not been bought that day, but rather had already been in the house long before the party happened to help lessen the charges. My sister's Facebook had also been completely deleted by her as soon as she was able to in order to hide the post. The judge just wanted the case over with, so my sister got off with a huge fine that our mom paid most of out of her own pocket, and a couple years probation. She was also made to get therapy too by her dad. She's never really shown actual remorse for what she did though, and only had animosity for me, no matter how in the wrong she was. She was eventually diagnosed as a narcissist after dad made her go see a doctor. After her probation and 4 years of college were over, she decided she was going to leave home for California and never come back once she landed a good job. She currently works in an office in LA, and we've not spoken in years. Dad got her that job, and she's not shown any real appreciation for it. Even my mom has given up on her ever coming home for the holidays and us being a family again. It tore her up inside for a few years. Now she's just bitter. She doesn't really blame me anymore, but we only seem to show indifference to each other. Just because my sister cut her off wouldn't make me the new de facto favorite. It just means my mom lost her baby, and isn't getting her back. She can't leave my dad because she's too reliant on him, despite having her own career. She'd never want to be on her own again, so she's just become a shell of her former self. Things between me and my dad are still great. He's pretty much disowned my sister for what she's done, and has stopped caring if she'll ever talk to him again. He and my mom don't even sleep in the same bedroom anymore. She moved into the guest room some 5 years ago and has stayed there. Their marriage is really only one on paper these days. Did a false accusation backfire on the accuser? The accuser ruined his family's life. My friend James was accused of something terrible which didn't end well for the person who made the allegation. James had probably the worst lie told about him by the 13-year-old son of his then girlfriend. They'd been together for approximately 9 months, and up until that point, he'd had a great relationship with the son. However, the son obviously missed the good old days when he had his mother all to himself, and it would appear that nostalgia got the better of him. It started off with little allegations against James, like he'd gotten angry at the boy and raised his voice. These were dismissed immediately by the mother, as she had been in the same room or within earshot when the incidents were alleged to have occurred. As these allegations were baseless and always failed to land, the son upped the ante somewhat and told his mother that he felt physically threatened by James. James is the type of guy who always walks around with a smile on his face and is liked by all. I have known him for over 25 years and have never seen him get into a fight or raise his voice or ever get angry with anyone, and especially not a child. He is one of life's gentle souls. I honestly believe the world would be a better place if there were more people like him in it. He was, however, concerned and upset about the allegations, and he tied himself in knots trying to figure out why the boy was saying these things about him. Each time he spoke to his then girlfriend about it, she would play it all down and tell him that he shouldn't worry, as children lie and exaggerate all the time. Apparently, for some reason she never spoke to the son about what the implications of lying could have, and I am certain that had she done, what happened next would have been avoided. The son went away one weekend to stay with his grandparents, his father's parents. James had a day out planned with his girlfriend on the Saturday, but the local constabulary had other ideas, and they swooped in and arrested him as they had received a complaint from the grandparents that James had been physically abusing the boy. He was handcuffed, taken away, and spent the day and night in the cells before being released under investigation. He could not go to his girlfriend, so he stayed with me, and I went to collect some clothes and his work swipe card. Although this was futile, as he was immediately suspended from his college lecturing job for safeguarding reasons. The girlfriend was home when I called around, and despite being upset and absolutely certain of his innocence, she, to me, didn't fully understand the ramifications of the false allegations. Her attitude was, "We know he's innocent, so the police will know too. They understand that children lie and exaggerate all the time." When I returned home, I found James was applying some form of rudimentary first aid to himself. He had stepped out of the house to get some milk and was accosted by the boy's father. I have absolutely no idea how he knew where I lived or that James was staying with me, but he found him nonetheless and administered some rough justice on him. James tried to reason with him, but the father was having none of it, and broke his nose and fractured his eye socket for good measure. The girlfriend's parents, who incidentally loved James and were thrilled that she had finally found someone decent, had their suspicions about the boy's allegations, and decided to gently question him themselves. The boy eventually told the truth when he was informed that his father would almost certainly be kicked out of the army for assaulting James in response to the allegation he'd made. He admitted that he'd made the whole thing up as he was jealous that he had to share his mother with someone else, as he liked having her all to himself. He also admitted that he liked having complete control over his mother, and he saw James' arrival as a threat to the status quo, so he hatched a plan to get rid of him and told his other grandparents that he'd been assaulted by James. They understandably hit the roof and pointed out to him that he was almost 14 years old and was old enough to know that lies can have far-reaching consequences. They immediately marched him to the police station, where he tearfully withdrew his allegation and informed them that he'd invented the whole thing. He admitted that James had never laid a finger on him nor raised his voice or had shown any form of aggression towards him. The investigating officer severely reprimanded the boy and told him he would remember his name for future reference should they cross paths when he became an adult. Unfortunately, despite the lie being exposed, the college decided to terminate James' contract regardless, again citing safeguarding. He took them to a tribunal and won the case. He was in line for a hefty payout, but pleaded with them to let him continue to teach, and he dropped the whole thing. Sadly, they wouldn't see sense, and despite the compensation, his career went up in smoke. The students lost a fine lecturer, and the institution was poorer for no longer having such an asset as James. The father was indeed kicked out of the army and was also charged with assault, which is ironic considering this was the charge leveled at James, and was given a suspended sentence, which of course means he will carry that wherever he goes and has now struggled to find employment. The mother's parents were rightfully disgusted that their grandchild could do such a thing and cut him out of the will. This was bad news for the boy, as they are very wealthy business people, and he was looking forward to living off their fortune so that he didn't have to worry about minor inconveniences such as working for a living. They saw James how we all see him, a thoroughly decent person, who loved that woman and her son with all his heart. They were devastated that the selfish actions of her son had stolen her happiness, and robbed her of the man that they had always hoped that she would find. The grandparents on the other side, the ones who called the police, sought James out and apologized to him, which was decent of them. The relationship they now have with their former daughter-in-law is non-existent, as she resents them for not speaking to her in the first instance, which of course could have prevented the chain reaction that was about to follow. They hardly see their grandson anymore, as they were also disgusted by his lie and his selfishness. James, and this is probably an indication of the type of person he is, considered getting back with the mother, but realized that sometimes some things are just too broken to mend. She is a single mother again, and I have seen her in the street on occasion. She is devastated at what happened, and wished things were how they were. Unfortunately for her, she is unlikely to find anyone else anytime soon, as her name is radioactive to prospective partners due to her son's lie. She told me that she's been on a few dates since, but as soon as the guy hears what happened in her last relationship, they end it pretty much immediately. She told me she loves her son regardless, just hates the lie that he told, which is fair. James has found work as a personal tutor and is also a contributor to a few business journals. He's doing okay, but is still gutted about what happened. He feels that despite his innocence, he is not entirely without fault, that perhaps he shouldn't have been so affectionate to the mother when the boy was around, as it probably fueled his jealousy. Not a happy ending for anyone involved, and this all came about because of one teenager's lie. Very sad indeed.